Hi everyone, welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast. And today I want to talk about a question that came up recently, which is someone had sat a 3-day course, and this isn't really finance related as such, but I thought it was still made a good podcast. So they'd sat a weekend course, they'd come out of it, and it was one of these ones with entry level. You go in, you sort of free or very, very cheap, and you sort of sit the 3-day course and you're given sort of tasters of lots of different strategies. And they'd come out of the 3-day course and they'd done slightly differently to what a lot of people do, which is a lot of people come out of it and they go, oh, well, it just sort of scratched the surface and I didn't really get anything from it and I don't really know what to do with the information, and so I'm just going to kind of abandon it and not really do anything with it. Well, this person had come out and they'd kind of gone the other way. They'd almost got overwhelmed in trying to do too much with it. So they'd come to me and said, well, look, I've done this course. What do you think I should do? And I sort of split it into two things for them because I didn't know their financial circumstances. So I split it into two things. So I said, look, if you've got no money, there are sort of 3-4 strategies that I would focus on. So the first one would be rent to rent. And I'm not going to go into each thing in detail because I think it's not really my area of expertise. So the first one was rent to rent, which is essentially kind of subletting is what I would call it. So you go find a house, you offer up a company let, and essentially it's then a case of subletting that property as either an HMO or service accommodation. Quite easy to get into once you start finding a good stream of sort of properties and agents that are sort of happy to do corporate lets, then obviously you'll start to find a good revenue stream from it. So rent to rent could be a good starting point. So if you want to take that further, you look at lease options. So lease options is how you turn rent to rent into an actual tangible business. So how you actually create something that's worth something at the end of it. Because the problem with rent to rent is, and I say this to anyone who operates rent to rent, the problem with rent to rent is there's no end value, because you have maybe a 2-year lease, 3-year lease, whatever it may be, or you're even on an AST. But at the end of that, you just have to hand the property back. There's no agreed purchase prices. There's no security of being able to keep those properties for a sort of decent period of time. So you end up in a situation whereby you've got no security, no prospects come the end of it. So by doing a lease option, what that does is that sort of nails in a purchase price early on. You're then tied into that lease. You know how long you've got on that lease. You know whether it's 3 years, 5 years, whatever. You know you've got that period of time to then purchase that property for that amount. By tying in the purchase prices on day one, you then also get the benefit of capital appreciation, because with rent to rent, let's say a property's worth £100,000. So with rent to rent, it's 100 grand for the house. You've got it for 3, 4, 5 years. At the end of 5 years, so you decide you can't really be bothered with rent to rent anymore. Oh, actually, I want to go purchase property. You go to purchase property, it's now 125 grand or 150 grand, whatever the figure is. And you've got to pay that because that's now what that property is worth. With a lease option, you agree 100 grand up front, and then at the end of 5 years, it's still 100 grand. So even if that property is then worth 125 or 150 grand, you're still only paying 100 grand. So I said, look, lease options are a good thing to get into as well. I then said about deal sourcing. So for me, deal sourcing is a big one because we've actually sourced our first deal now, which was quite enjoyable. It was 1.5% of purchase price that we made on that one. And it was actually quite a decent deal. And I'd probably do a pod on that at some point. But deal sourcing is a great one because actually I tend to find the best deals do tend to come from good deal sources. And you can have good deal sources, you can have horrendous deal sources. So by becoming a good deal sourcer, you are naturally going to get good deal flow, good flow of investors, etc. So, and that can be a good way of, for minimal startup cost, building up big pots of cash, which you can then go and invest into other strategies. So sort of pointed them in those directions to sort of get started and said, look, there's a few that you can get started with. I said, if you want to get into sort of buy, refurbish, refinance with investor money, you could also do that as well. And said, well, look, if you've got maybe 50, 100 grand, so if you've got 50 grand laying about, let's say for argument's sake, what would I do with that 50 grand? Well, I would probably go into the northeast, looking sort of around Newcastle area. I would probably go and purchase a small 70, 80 grand property, because if I've got 50 grand, I know I can leverage that 50 grand up a bit as well. So I'm talking about buying a couple of properties, maybe 70, 80 grand a piece. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a small refurb to them, and then they're maybe going to be worth 100 grand, maybe 110. Do that a few times, maybe do that for a couple of years. And then I'm going to then have a pot, which I'm then going to, let's say I then have 100, 200 grand. I'm then going to look at maybe small commercial conversions, HMOs, probably steer clear of land deals. The only reason being is because I think if you've come out of a weekend course and you're not really sure where to go, I think trying to jump into a land deal is quite a big jump. I think you need to have almost a bit of experience of all of these different little things in order to then culminate together into this experience of them being able to go and do a land deal. Because the problem with developments, big heavy refurbs, is they do have a lot of moving parts. And I just feel like being able to come out of the back of all of these different little bits that you've done, bring it all together, just gives you that experience and that knowledge to then be able to work through something of a larger scale. So sort of said, look, 100, 200 grand, you can probably get into small commercial conversions, HMOs, that sort of thing. When you get up to 500 grand, that's when you can maybe start doing the larger scale sort of commercial conversions and maybe start looking at small land deals and that kind of thing. So there's quite a progressive route that you can kind of go through with it. And I think if you're looking at getting started in property, there's this, I don't know what I would call it, almost peer pressure is probably the closest thing. I think almost this peer pressure of you go to a 3-day weekend course and then you have to jump into the first course that you find, masterminds, all this sort of thing. You tend to find all these people, they spend 20, 30, 40 grand on education. You think actually that pot of money could get you through most of these things that you could sort of look at strategy wise. I just think that peer pressure almost needs to come away, and you need to be able to go to that weekend course. You need to be able to, it's almost like a taster dinner. You almost get like these little 7 dishes, like a little taster menu. And what I tend to find is that's what you need to look at the weekend course as, is you're sort of getting these little tasters of all these different strategies, the rent to rents, the deal sourcing, the commercial conversions, the developments, the buy to lets, the portfolio purchasing, all that different thing. Almost taking a little bit of each one and then sort of coming out of it and actually giving yourself time to go, right, what do I actually want to focus on? Because this person had come out, they'd had 7 different strategies put in front of them, and they wanted to go ahead with all 7 strategies. And I think that's where a lot of people make that mistake. I think do the weekend course, come out of the weekend course, take a couple of weeks. There's no rush. And I think that's what people need to remember, is there's no big rush. Come out of it, sit down, take a deep breath, work out which one you want to go for, and then focus on that one strategy. And it may be that even you can focus on 1 or 2. So you might do deal sourcing, and then you might do rent to rent or lease options, because as you're out there deal sourcing, you might find opportunities from agents for rent to rent. So you can sort of combine some of these strategies together. But I think for any of you that have come out of a weekend course, and it maybe even just a free course, I think coming out of that, I mean, hopefully this has given some guidance as to how you should sort of approach it. And it's quite a beginner question, this, in the sense of, this is a very early stage, and I appreciate everyone who listens to the podcast is at completely different stages of their property career. But I think if anyone's listening to this and has done a course, I think just try and take that step back, do your taster menu, and then take a deep breath and sort of have a look and work out which one you want to do. But hopefully that's been helpful. It's been more of an opinion piece than anything else. But yeah, hopefully you found it helpful. I'll catch you on the next one.